I hope we can look forward to having you back with us on Peep Magazine tomorrow night. In the meantime, I'd like to wish you all a very good night. Good night. I used to hate seeing this BBC One time logo because I would be in the house by myself and it would be 12 o'clock or 12:15, and that only meant one thing, that my granddad was still out drinking, getting drunk, and then the national anthem would kick in. My granddad would always make an entrance in the house shouting, "Is everybody happy?" when there would just be me in the house most of the time, and I would either be asleep. I don't know what I was doing. Don't know what. I can't remember that far back to what I was actually doing at that time at night. Probably just looking over my shoulder, being terrified of the house. One of the first things I can remember him saying to me was, "No blacks, no dogs, no Irish," and I at the time didn't know what he meant, but he used to say that all the time. And when he first came to the UK, he also told me that he couldn't believe how dirty the place was, and like the toilets weren't in the house, and he called it fucking squalor. And he used to say that a few times. He actually came from Honduras, from quite a wealthy background. His mum and dad were quite well off. They ran a business and they owned several acres of land as well, so he always used to talk about all the luxuries he had back in Honduras, but his Roman spirit, he couldn't stay there, and he enlisted in the army and come over to Britain with a few of his friends in 1940. A guy called Tommy, who was very loud, loved to drink, and wasn't a stranger to a fight in the street. Paul, who was one of my granddad's closest friends, just generally quite quiet, and a guy called Alec, who used to play the guitar. He was exceptionally good as well. There's a rumour that Brian Ferry actually come to Newcastle. Well, he was also from Newcastle, but they were friends, and I think he got Alec to play on one of his early songs. When he first got off the boat, or however he got here, he was stationed in Scotland with the army, and he said that he met heavyweight boxing champion Joe Lewis, and I believe him. But he also used to say that he played football for Brazil, and of course that wasn't true, but he did actually play football, but it was in Honduras. He also talks about when he first walked the streets with his friends, which would have been about 1940, 41, 42, and he talks about how people were physically shocked at just the sight of a black person in the streets of Newcastle. He also says that him and his friends were probably the first black people to ever come into Newcastle and walk around. I mean, it must have been a hell of a sight. He also told me that when he was first in Newcastle, he found a bedsit, and it was soon robbed. I mean, they robbed everything. That's what he told me. They took his clothes, they took his photographs, everything you think of what you could have to travel away with, all your belongings, all your private little things. They took them all, every last thing. So he said he didn't have anything, you know. So I think that's quite sad when you look back, being in a strange country and having like absolutely like nothing, not even anything to look at. He met his soon-to-be wife at Newcastle Central Station, which was my grandma, who I didn't have the pleasure of meeting. She worked in a cafe. This must have been about 1945, 46. Unfortunately, she passed away She passed away with leukemia, and she was very young. She was only 35. If I'm not mistaken, she was about 35. So I think this made me granddad like a bit bitter, angry, and I don't think he fully recovered from. His wife passing away, and of course it was his first wife, and he never met anyone again since. And I think he had some kind of deep mistrust for women. He didn't really look at any other woman in the same way. It was strange. So that was his lifelong love, and she passed away, unfortunately. So he also had to raise 4 kids by himself in the northeast of England, a place called Scotswood. It's a mixed emotions place. Some people say it's good if you live there. The people who don't live there would never go down there ever. It's had a really terrible reputation, but I found it to be okay, and he didn't really have any problems down there, so it couldn't have been that bad. But you always hear things from the outside. What I also failed to mention is my granddad ran his own business, and he was an exceptional car mechanic. He could just fix like anything with a motor in or a mechanical structure. He could fix it. He could just hear things, and he would also tell you what was wrong with it. He was like the engine whisperer, just exceptionally talented person. And he had his own business down on Scotswood Road. The business was called High Level Motors. It's obviously not there now, but I have spoken to a couple of people about it, and it did actually exist. And so this wasn't a white lie, so to speak. This was actually legit, and I don't know how long he ran that for, but he must have had it for at least 10 years, fixing cars and engines and trucks and all the rest of it. But he must have been really good at that. So there's a couple of stories also with him before he must have got his own business. He must have been touting himself around to various garages and car mechanics businesses, and I was told he would turn up and then he would do half a day. He would just go in the pub, and he wouldn't come back. He had no concept of, well, he did, but he played no mind to like, oh, you've got to be back here at 12:30. It didn't compute in his brain. He would just go. He'd go at 12:30, and you wouldn't see him for about four days. And then I've heard a couple of things where managers would come and try and look for him, and he must have been able to hold his ground, because there's no one actually said anything to him. But like back in the day, you know, so he was either very intimidating himself when he answered back, or he just didn't give a toss. Just, I don't care what happens. I just don't think he cared. He didn't really care about work, and he was a hard worker, but he wouldn't pay any mind to someone telling him what to do, or come back at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. He would take that as a personal insult to never come back. He also had a terrific scar running from the bottom of his lip right across his chin. It was like a V shape. I always remember looking at it when I was a kid. It's just like a massive V shape, deep V running under his lip, right across his chin. He told me that an engine actually dropped on his head, resulting in losing all his teeth, so he had to get all his teeth pulled out. So that's what he said happened, and I believe him. But I also heard that he was committed into hospital. I don't know what year this was, maybe sometime in the 50s or early 60s. Someone told me that the hospital actually removed his teeth because he was going absolutely, he was acting out of mind, you know. So I don't know which one's true there, but I tend to believe, I think they could have both happened. I think they could have both happened. But he would always carry a screwdriver in his inside pocket. If it wasn't a screwdriver, I mean, there would be an array of things that sometimes I used to pull out of his pockets, like corkscrews, table knives, butter knives. I pulled the spoon out a few times. But I think, I mean, I can laugh about it now, but when I think back, all the assortment of knives and like utensils almost. He must have been totally paranoid about walking the streets at night, because he would always walk back through Scotswood or through various areas of the northeast, and it must have been like 12 o'clock at night, half 12, 1 o'clock at night, like absolutely drunk out his brain. And there'd be a lot of times where me and me uncle and me aunties would be sitting in the house and would look out the window, and sometimes it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and he would just be knocking on random doors in the street, just like knocking on the door, whistling up to the windows. And I mean, I used to do this. I used to watch him when I was on my own, and I was just in stitches, laughing, because he would have the whole street up. He would have the entire street up, looking out the windows, like, who is this guy knocking on all the doors? But it was completely innocent. He was so drunk that he would just think he was at the right house. So you can imagine the chaos in the streets sometimes. He would bring everyone chips and pies, and he must have spent about £20 on. He must have spent about £20 on that chip in that chip shop. I think it was half guilt, because he had been out all day, and you know, this would make up for it. But there was a couple of funny times where sometimes he would come home like with nothing, you know, just like one bag of chips for like a couple of people. And I always used to think, why would he just buy a bag of chips? But in the morning when I used to walk home, and it would always happen in the snow, I would find a pie, and I would walk up May Street. I would see like a fish, and then another fish, and then another bag of chips, and then a pot of gravy falling. But he was obviously just slipping down and dropping all the stuff. And then he eventually got home with either what was left, or a bag of chips, or nothing. So I thought that was quite funny. Obviously not at the time, but you got to take these little things, you know, these little comedic moments. Back in the day, we used to have a 4-bar fire. Well, that's what he had, because I think we had the gas cut off because he forgot to pay for it, or didn't pay for it, or couldn't pay for it. So we had an electric bar fire, and we also had a very crazy dog called Prince, an African Ridgeback. And the dog was, I don't like to say the word crazy, but the dog just would bite anyone on sight. It would hate other dogs, any other dog it would hate. And there was one night we thought the house was on a fire because we smelt this like horrible burning hair smell. And it was a dog had got that close to the fire. The dog was actually on fire. That it had 4 bars running up its back and neck and head, and it just carried on sleeping, I think. Not a care in the world. So yeah, I mean, I know quite a lot about him, and he actually adopted me from the age of three or four. So I owe quite a lot to this guy. So I used to stay up and listen to his stories, and he wasn't out. He wasn't. I'm given the impression that he was out drinking every night, but he actually didn't go out every night. It was maybe 3-4 times a week with his brother-in-law, my Uncle Bob, which they were about the same age. And my Uncle Bob was actually born in England, and the brother of my granddad's wife, my grandma, you know. So they became very close friends, drinking colleagues or buddies or whatever. But they were more like brothers, and they're like best friends, you know. I had a love-hate relationship with him because he used to take my granddad out all the time, but I tell you what, he was one of the funniest guys, always winding people up and like the Geordie humour, you know, which my granddad never ever got really. He never got the northeast or the English humour, but he would like Benny Hill and all the rest of it. But if he caught you laughing, he was stupid. He would also say that when we were dropping off to sleep, I think he was a bit paranoid about death. He's always talking about it, dying, and when I die, and there seemed to be like a reoccurring theme. But he said I mean, I must have been about 5 at the time, 6, 7, and he always said that he would stay alive till I was 18, 19, and true to his word, he did, because he passed away when I was around 19, early 20s. So I don't know if he kind of knew that's how long he was going to last, but yeah, that was the strength of the man, you know. This Whitehouse Road is kind of a remake, because I actually done this film at university, and I've always wanted to rediscover the film, because I felt like I didn't say enough. It didn't really capture what the guy was about, you know. But yeah, that's my granddad, also called Cliff Sainsbury, and I've actually got his exact same name. I owe a lot to him, and so that's it. Thanks.